we, with great regret, we're losing Robbie Janos, who's been a longtime board member and a really valuable contributor to our board, as well as Ben Freeman, who also has been on the board for a long time. Their contribution has been just outstanding over the years, for a lot longer than I've been here. So we regret that they're leaving, but I'm going to make an announcement on their behalf today. Even if they're leaving our board, you've heard me several times during the meeting talk about Texas State Technical College and what a big role they're playing and how we're working together with that technical college. They have asked both Robbie and Ben to take a seat on their advisory board at TSTC in developing their associate's degree in plumbing. That's a program that's down the road that we hope to participate with them in helping develop. So by having Ben and Robbie both on that advisory board to help TSTC develop a curriculum to actually attain an associate's degree in plumbing, it's going to dovetail perfectly with our board. They're familiar with what we're doing and what our requirements are, so they'll still be contributing even if they're not on our board. I'm happy to announce that the governor's appointment office has done an absolutely outstanding job in appointing 2 new members to our board that I've had the opportunity the last week or so to meet and go through some training with and spend some personal time with, and will attest to you that they are absolutely fine people that are aligned with our goal of public safety, as well as aligning our agency with the needs of the plumbing industry. So I'm going to take just a moment and ask them to introduce themselves. It's Mr. Darren Black from Abilene, sitting on the end down here, and Tommy Rice to my left from the Spring area. So Darren, why, if you will, would you start it off and just tell us a little about yourself, and then I'll turn it over to Tommy. We're having some technical difficulties. So Mr. Rice, do you mind starting us off?
No problem.
Okay.
My name is Tommy Rice. Growing up in the plumbing industry, started setting tubs with my dad when I was 13, 14 years old. Pushed me away from the industry, tried to get me educated and get out of it, but it was always home. Worked my way through college here at the University of Texas, and it seemed like I took a wayward route, but couldn't get back to plumbing as soon enough. Through multiple organizations, I have participated in some of the governmental actions, legislative sessions through PHCC and others, and just kind of felt comfortable speaking on the industry's behalf, and was honored to accept the invitation to join the board and help guide the industry into the future.
Thank you, Tommy. Are we ready down here, Darren? I don't know how happy it makes me that someone else is having some technical difficulty other than me.
It would happen to me, not Tommy.
I cannot tell you how much I appreciate having you on our board, so somebody else can struggle with that.
Yes, sir. So if everybody's got me, I'm Darren Black. I'm from Abilene, Texas. I'm the owner of Black Plumbing there. I've been in this industry since 1984. Proud to be from Abilene. Proud to be to say that I've got a son that's also in the business. 34 years old. He's also a master plumber. I hold a med gas endorsement also. I've owned Black Plumbing for 28 years. Being appointed to the board was something I applied for 4 years ago, and so basically it was a long-standing wait. Since being appointed, it's been quite the experience of being inundated with all the classes, and so it's just the educational part of that has been an experience already. I look forward to the board meetings and being impactful over this next 6 years and hoping to steer our board and our plumbers and our citizens right in the right direction. So thank you all for having me.
Thank you, Tommy and Darren. We really do appreciate your time. I know by talking with you, you're going to make an outstanding contribution to our board. I look at the quality of the board members that we have, and I feel like a brown shoe in a tuxedo world with all this expertise that we have on our board up here. We've got a good diversity and a mix of the home builders, the plumbers, public members, inspectors, engineers. So we've really got a quality board that I think that the industry can be proud of. Before we go any further, Mark Sylvester, as I mentioned earlier, is traveling today and is unable to be here in person or by Zoom call. But I would like to entertain a motion that his absence be excused today. Is there a motion to excuse the absence of Mark Sylvester, please?
Dave Yelovich, so moved.
Have a motion. Is there a second?
Milton, second.
Milton Gutierrez, second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, board members. As I mentioned, Robbie is no longer on our board, and Robbie served as our board secretary. And board members, you have in your packet the duties of the board secretary. It's the only other official on our board. So it would be in order for us at this time to nominate and vote on a board secretary. Are there any nominations for board secretary?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Justin McDonald. I'd like to nominate Ron Ainsworth as secretary of the board.
I have a nomination for Mr. Ainsworth. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Yelovich. Are there any further nominations? Hearing none, all those in favor of Mr. Ainsworth election as board secretary, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Congratulations, Mr. Ainsworth, who reluctantly takes this spot. The good news is your pay doubles as a board secretary. So you've gone from 0 to 0 plus. It doubled 0. So all kidding aside, thanks, Ron. And again, thanks to Ben and Robbie for the outstanding work that they've done on this board for years and years and years, long before I got here. And before I move on, I also want to recognize that since our last board meeting, Milton Gutierrez was reappointed to our board. This is what, your second term or?
Yes, sir. Second term.
Second term. So we are thrilled to have him back. And also there's been a major event in his life. Since we were here last, he has been promoted to major in the reserves. So a big congratulations to you, Milton. That's quite an accomplishment.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're really proud of your accomplishments, and we just deeply appreciate your service that you provide for our country. So thanks a lot. And we're glad to have you back on the board. So in looking at our agenda, let's move to item number 7. And item number 7 is report on meeting with the Texas Education Agency regarding implementation of House Bill 636, Career and Technology Education Program for Tradesman Plumber Limited License. I'm not even going to begin to try to tell you about a series of meetings that Robbie and I participated in since our last board meeting. As our board knows, and as the industry knows, House Bill 636 gave us a great deal of authority and expanded our responsibilities. And late in the legislative process, and I've talked about it before, but it bears talking about it again. Representative Symphonia Thompson really was a champion for our industry, and she was instrumental in getting House Bill 636 passed through the legislature. So we will always be indebted to Representative Thompson for her hard work on our behalf, and we are very appreciative. But we can't overlook someone else who late in the process added an amendment to House Bill 636, Representative Matt Schaefer from Tyler. Representative Schaefer offered an amendment on House Bill 636. I say it authorizes us to do this. Matt Schaefer tells me that we're mandated to do it. But at any rate, we're both in agreement we want to do it. It allows us, or requires us, that once a young person attend, or I guess an old person too, they attend an approved course either in a trade school of higher education or high school with an approved curriculum, that we allow them to sit for the tradesman exam. So Representative Schaefer, his chief of staff, Sarah Hartsfield, put together a series of meetings. I guess it was 4 or 5 or 6, I've lost count. But we were meeting to make sure that we were able to implement this proposal and put it in place. There are a lot of moving parts to this. I found out that the primary focus of the meeting was on the plumbing board. Apparently, they viewed the plumbing board as an obstacle for this being implemented. And I did the very best that I could to let them know we're not only on board, we wholeheartedly support any opportunity to bring more licensed plumbers into the industry and pursue plumbing as a career. So those participating in the meeting were the Texas Education Agency, the Higher Education Coordinating Board, State Board of Education, Matt Schaefer, his chief of staff, Matthew Wynn was there. We had a plumbing company from Tyler. We had a representative from the Tyler Independent School District who has an interest in putting together this program. And as I said, we went through maybe 4 or 5 or meetings or 6. I think we're done now. But the bottom line, we're good to go. Based after we do one more thing at our board. Back in August, and it's found in your board book under tab 7, you will see a page with 5 course outlines on it. These are broad course outlines that are currently being utilized at TSTC. They have been approved by the Higher Education Coordinating Board for teaching plumbing. Robbie Janos and Ron actually traveled with me to Waco, and we spent a better part of a day going through, actually looking at their facilities, meeting their instructors. We're in discussions with all their academic people to ensure that the training that's provided in these 5 broad course outlines, which Ron Ainsworth presented at our last board meeting and we approved, covered the broad gamut that would need to be covered for a tradesman limited license. And we approved those. Let's see where I can go from here. The only thing that we did, well, let me keep going. So at any rate, the trade school was taken care of as far as we were concerned, but that did not address the high school program. So we met with TEA. TEA gave us what they call a TEACS outline. And it's also found in your board book, and I hope that you've studied it and looked at it. But they had already prepared this 2 or 3 years ago. And it is a comprehensive, in detail, 9-page document of subject matter that has to be covered in order to qualify for a high school to put on a plumbing program. When we got that, Robbie and Lisa and Ron and I looked at this comprehensive 9-page document that TEA already had prepared, and we made an initial determination, subject to board approval, that this would also serve as a substantially equivalent program to the one that we had approved back in August. I don't think there's any question, if you look at the subject matter, it is comprehensive. It is so much more comprehensive than even what we had, these broad course outlines that we had approved. We thought it more than fit the bill. So we gave initial approval, again, subject to board approval, that this program would be acceptable to us. And if any student, and it's a 2.5-year program in high school, and it has a prerequisite, a construction trades course that has to be taken before they're even eligible to get into the plumbing. It also adds, I was told we could not do something, and it's my fault that we did it. We had also required, once they complete these curriculums or these course of study at a trade school or a high school, that they sit for the OSHA 10 program. I was told, and correctly told, that the plumbing board could not require an additional requirement beyond what these courses provided. And we understood that, and that is correct. It's in the legislation. We can't add something on other than what's in these curriculums. So we went back and looked at it with a different eye. And I, particularly on the TEACS program, ask you to take a look at item number 2 on their TEACS program. It is devoted entirely to safety, as well as when you go through the TEACS program and it talks about working with equipment and tools, safety is also embedded in every portion of the question. So the 4 of us looked at that and we said, well, it's not going to provide an OSHA 10 certificate, but the subject of safety has been comprehensively covered. So we find it to be adequate, and it's not going to be a barrier for us approving this program. Again, subject to board approval. Let me get back to the trade schools. I went back to TSTC and I asked them to take a look at the TEACS outline, specifically item number 2, having to do with safety, and to look at the current program that they are providing to ensure that these elements of safety training are embedded in the current program that they have. They have come back to me and said those safety components are included in all the training they do, and offered that if I wanted it and we might request it, that they can give us specifics as to where these safety provisions are covered. So I'm confident, based upon their commitment to us, that these safety components are covered, that there's no further action on our part with respect to the trade school. I think what we have done is sufficient and adequate. I think they have demonstrated to me, at least, that they do cover the safety components that are found in the TEACS program number 2, specifically, that they do cover those items. So safety training is a part of what they're doing today. What I'm asking the board to do today is to consider approval of the TEACS program that was provided to us by the Texas Education Agency as an approved course of study, that once a student completes this, that they be allowed to sit for the tradesman exam. I'll be happy to answer any questions, but I want to tell you this up front. When we looked at the program, it's a good thing that it was adequate and it was so comprehensive, and I'm speaking of the TEACS high school program. Because had we have decided, well, no, that's not enough, we want to add something else, I don't even want to think about how long it would take TEA to change their outline. They are an agency like I've never met before. I I guess I don't speak education language because I was struggling to keep up with even what they were talking about over there. And I'm not being critical because they are so fine-tuned and so focused on every single aspect of education that probably I don't have the appreciation that I should have. But it did give me a confidence level that they have taken this very seriously. And so we are hopeful that the board will agree with Robbie and Ron and Lisa and I that this program is comprehensive enough to merit your approval in order for a student to sit for the tradesman exam. But I'm not saying I won't do it because I'll do whatever the board says. But I highly recommend that we not try to modify this TEACS program unless you want to delay it 2 or 3 years being implemented. I don't expect swift action out of TEA to modify their program. So it's a good thing. It was a good one when it came to us. So are there any questions among any of the board members about what we're doing, about the trade school program or the high school program, or what the meetings that went on? I'll be happy to answer to the best of my ability any questions that you might have. Yes, sir, Justin.
A question for Ron, I guess, since you were involved in this too, and you're a master plumber and I am not. Are you satisfied that this would prepare people to come out and work as journeymen under you if they went through this, or excuse me, tradesman? Yeah, sorry, not journeyman, as a tradesman under you, and you know, after they go through this coursework.
I'll give you kind of a diplomatic answer, hopefully, because I think there's two sides to that. To answer that is that, yes, it's comprehensive. I look back when I was a young plumber, I'd have killed to have that much information available to me. But I think one thing we have to be real careful with in the industry and as a board, you know, we have some, in my mind, public safety is number one, you know, and then we're set some guidelines for plumbing in the state, support the staff, but ultimately every business owner is going to be responsible for who he puts on a truck and what he puts them doing. We can't legislate that. There are guys that could probably come out of this program. They've got great aptitude, and you feel like you could just throw them out on their own almost instantaneously. And there's other guys that just may have went through it and got the certificate, but you know, you got to make a determination. And I don't think that's really a board situation, but
Sure.
I do think the program is comprehensive.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's still going to fall to the responsible master plumber that these guys are working under.
Well, I don't think we have that term anymore, do we? Yeah. Okay, we still have that. I thought that was part of the, well, anyway.
Or
But
whomever is
whoever's in
the
charge
licensed
has to make it
supervisor of
Yeah,
this person. Yeah.
Yeah. And Mr. Chairman, I have a question. I know, you know, we've looked at this with TEA. We've looked at it with TSTC. Has anyone else come forward? You know, you got the union program. There's some DOL. Has anybody approached staff or the board about their programs?
Let me speak to that if I could, Lisa, before, and obviously I want you to weigh in also. Before our last board meeting, we did have an inquiry from another trade school or a junior college that was interested in implementing the program. And certainly these broad outlines that we have provided are available to any high school in the state and any trade school in the state. There is a definition in the legislation that defines what an educational institution is. It's basically a junior college, a trade school, a 4-year college. Any of those can adopt these outlines that we have proposed and that TSTC is currently using and put in their own plumbing program. And every one of those students that successfully complete that program, either in high school or trade school, are going to be eligible to take the test just like everyone else. But to answer your question, to my knowledge, Lisa, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not aware of but one junior college who has approached us with an interest of putting together a plumbing program. Lisa, are you aware of any more at this point?
Over the years, we've had different organizations contact us. Recently, I haven't spoken directly to anyone. I have a couple of emails from some career colleges. We've visited with different schools. And what I expect is now that everything gets ramped up, we're going to be very busy reaching out to them and them to us. So St. Philip's, all of those people.
Yeah. I have, and you know, Robbie was involved and talked with St. Philip's in San Antonio, and they have a plumbing program, but they're very interested in matching what they're doing to this curriculum and having their own program. So I know there's 2 or 3. I anticipate there's going to be a lot more. Our board has discussed this a lot in the last 60 or 90 days, but keep in mind, this has really not been public to any extent other than a board discussion. So as we speak, Matt Schaefer's office has contacted us, and Kevin Dick is going to work with Matt Schaefer's office to put out a joint press release of the availability of this program throughout the state. So I have a feeling when that press release goes out, we're going to be covered up in inquiries. And I'm just telling you, I am so supportive of this. If you look at what I perceive our problem to be in Texas, we have a huge shortage of plumbers in Texas to meet the current robust demand of the economy in Texas. We got the fastest growing economy in the United States, and we have not kept up with supplying a workforce for it. That demand is not going to go down. By implementing this program, I think it's going to be a game-changing scenario for our industry. I think that, and you look at our industry itself, we've got 70-something thousand plumbers. The average age of our master plumber is 58 years old. We desperately need an influx of people into this industry to fill those voids 5 and 10 years down the road. And I believe this is going to be a game changer. And when we're patting Representative Thompson on the back for passing House Bill 636, which we should, let's also pat Matt Schaefer, Representative Schaefer, on the back for allowing us or mandating us, whatever you want to call it, to recognize these training programs to bring a new influx of plumbers into our industry. Off subject, but I'm going to come to it in just a second, but it's directly related. Our challenge as an agency, we've got a year or 2 lead time for these people to work their way through these trade schools and through these plumbing programs in high school. We as an agency have got to ramp up our ability to test these folks. And we are well on our way in accomplishing that objective. If you look at the plumbing board, at continuing education, at testing, at new programs, we have got a lot of balls up in the air. But all of which, it's like a huge puzzle. But all these puzzle pieces are going to come together. When you look at this new influx of students that are going to be wanting to take the tradesman exam, you look at our new $1 million testing facility that TSTC is building us in Waco. They're going to build us another one in Harlingen down the road. We're going to have the capacity as an agency to handle this influx of people. And I'm sure the lawyers are pulling their hair out because I'm getting off topic, but it is on topic because it has to do with licensing new plumbers in this tradesman program. I'm going to tell you something that hasn't been announced yet, but I've been authorized to tell it. We're going to have a testing center here in Austin. We're going to have a testing center in Waco. And between getting both of these up and operational full time, TSTC has also agreed to put on the road and buy us an 18-wheeler with a huge box trailer with all of our equipment in that will serve as a mobile testing unit. So we'll be able to take that mobile unit far north in the Panhandle, far south in South Texas. We'll be able to take it to El Paso. We'll be able to take it to Shreveport, Louisiana, or Shreveport, this side of the border in Texas. We'll be able to reach all corners of Texas with this mobile testing unit. So we are well on our way to prepare this agency to handle this influx of new students. The challenge that we have is going to be ramping up our personnel, our testing personnel, because that's where we come in. TSTC has provided us the capital investment, but it's going to be our responsibility to do the testing of all these students. And on this mobile unit, I remember back in, maybe it was in January, a member of the public suggested, well, the problem with this backlog you have, you need to get a mobile testing unit. And I remember it vividly. Somebody from the public suggested that. And I thought, well, that's a good idea, but it's just not right now. We need 2 full-time facilities going. And once we get these full-time facilities going, then we'll have the mobile testing unit. So for those of you, and I know Lisa has talked about this for years, our examination staff has always had a vision of having a mobile testing unit that we can take to these remote areas of the state that won't justify a full-time testing center. So we are ramping up our capacity within the agency to meet the demand that if you approve these course outlines for high schools, we're ramping up our capacity to take care of it. Any other, I've said a lot, but it's such a big deal that I want to make sure that our public audience, by the way, thank you to all of you who showed up today. We've got a nice crowd of folks here in person today, and we really appreciate your taking the time coming out. You're gluttons for punishment to sit here and listen to all of this, but thank you for being here. Board members, any other comment before I entertain a motion to approve the TEACS program for high schools? Questions or comments? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the TEACS outline as provided in our board book?
Ron Ainsworth, so moved.
Justin McDonald, second.
Ron Ainsworth made the motion. Justin McDonald seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, board members. And during our public comment period, Matthew Wynn is here with us. If I overlooked anything or anyone in those meetings, he participated in many, if not all of them. Feel free to chime in. But okay, takes care of item number 7, including 7A, which talks about the safety component being embedded in both programs, both the high school and the trade school. So both of those items are covered. The next item 8 is board strategies for increasing the number of licensed plumbers in Texas, including discussion of a draft reciprocity agreement with the state of Louisiana. Mr. Yelovich at our last meeting brought us a report of other states that have similar type testing programs. And Dave and I talked, and I think he's in agreement, and I believe the board is in agreement. Probably Louisiana is the closest we have that we're aware of that have testing requirements similar to ours. So what we did, and today I'm not asking for any kind of final approval on this, it's strictly a discussion item. I just want to kind of gauge the board's feelings toward these reciprocity agreements. We have mailed this draft reciprocity agreement to Louisiana. They have indicated a willingness to participate in this agreement. If they did agree to it, a final reciprocity agreement would come back to our board and you would have an opportunity to give final approval to it. This is strictly a draft agreement that we've sent to them for a discussion. And if they approve it, then it'll come back to your board for you to approve it. There's a little bit of difference, as I understand it, in Louisiana. Their plumbing license does not have a gas. Is it right, Lisa? It does not have a gas component. They have a separate license for dealing with gas, whereas ours is incorporated into our journeyman license. Is that right? So this reciprocity agreement requires them to have both licenses, one for the gas and one for the journeyman plumber. They also have a practical component where they actually have to come in and do a hands-on. And what this would allow us to do, if a journeyman, well, why journeyman? From my perception, what we need in Texas is more lieutenants and captains and majors. We got a pretty good supply of generals being master plumbers and responsible master plumbers. But what we need are the people on the front line. So this, by allowing journeyman plumber to, in Louisiana, who is licensed, apply for a Texas license, that journeyman license would entitle them to a Texas license without the necessity of taking an examination. Because they've already been tested in Louisiana. We found the testing that they do to be an equivalent to what we provide here. So that's kind of where we're going. It would allow Texas responsible master plumbers or master plumbers, if they have an applicant coming from Louisiana, there won't be any wait time to put them to work. They will simply apply for a license. There won't be any wait time. They'll be issued a Texas license. They will pay the same fee as anyone else who's qualified to get a Texas journeyman's license. If they choose to keep a Louisiana license in addition to a Texas license, that's their responsibility to pay Louisiana and pay us. One doesn't get them the other. They have to handle it themselves. So is the board in concept in agreement with reaching out specifically to Louisiana to see if we can put together this reciprocity agreement? Any comments or?
I'd just like to support it to the level that I have a master's license in Louisiana. I've taken plumbing exams in about a dozen states. At various times, I've held up to 10 state licenses, and I agree that Louisiana, of the dozen or so that I've taken, is probably the most comprehensive and the most similar to the Texas scope of examination. And I would have no problem supporting a Louisiana licensed plumber to come across and a reciprocity agreement with Texas.
Anyone else?
Have any comment?
I appreciate reading through this.
Alrighty, we on. I went through this a couple times and I was just running scenarios through my head as far as, what ifs, and there's some clauses in there that just, things would be asked, they would still have to pass, fingerprinting and the things we require and this and that. As far as discipline, if let's say this went through and somebody has both licenses through this agreement, if one state disciplined a plumber for something, would that be reported back to the other state due to this agreement, or is there anything that would allow sharing of information as far as disciplinary actions?
I don't think so. Lisa, can you answer that question?
When they make application, part of the application process right now, and the plan would be to roll it over, is that they have a license in good standing. So we'll be determining if the license is in good standing from Louisiana. And we most certainly could make it clear that if there a discipline occurs in Louisiana or whatever the state, other state this occurs in, that we be made aware if something was revoked in that case. But in good standing is where it's going to go in the beginning.
Something else that our board should know, there is a process for these reciprocity agreements. It's not just us agreeing with Louisiana and approving it as a board. In Texas, it requires the governor's approval. So once we go through this process with Louisiana, and if we do reach an agreement, then the reciprocity agreement would have to go to the governor's office, and it would require the governor's signature before it would be enacted. But I just kind of wanted to gauge the board's feeling about these reciprocity agreements, whether you support them or you're opposed to them. And more specifically, the next item on the agenda is what other states would you recommend that we consider evaluating or looking at, considering whether or not to offer a reciprocity agreement. I know Tommy holds a license in Colorado, and we spent a little time talking about the Colorado program.
Due to the CE requirements in many states necessitating travel out of state, I let a lot of my out-of-state licenses lapse. The only one that I kept up was Louisiana, because I felt that it was, literally a neighboring state, and we had no issues. And they began accepting PACC initially, and later some other CE classes in Texas as their continuing education certification. So I didn't have to travel to their own state to take their certificate. But the other states test so differently. I think that Texas, Louisiana really do it better than anybody else, and I believe that our test is the most comprehensive of any that I took. So I think we'd have to go item by item on what's actually covered and determine, what we were willing to accept as equal, because frankly, very few states do a practical component, and the ones that do it in such a smaller scope than Texas that there's an argument that that's acceptable as proving practical aptitude in plumbing. And I think that's a long discussion that we need to have, item by item. There may be some points of our test that may be a bit, outdated, but definitely show an aptitude for plumbing, but, maybe an item of plumbing that doesn't happen very often anymore.
I think I'm hearing there's no other state that jumps out at any member of the board that we should aggressively look at or evaluate. Justin, you had before I just call on you, Justin, let me interject here one thing. As I understand it, Mark Sebesta, who was listening to us by phone, has now joined us through video. So he is participating in the meeting, and it would necessitate us rescinding the excused absence because he now is in attendance. So is there a motion to rescind that excused absence for Mark Sebesta and indicate that he is on our video conference?
So moved. Ron Ainsworth.
Have a motion, Mr. Ainsworth.
A second.
Second, Mr. McDonald. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you,
Welcome,
Mr.
Mark,
Chairman.
and thank you so much for participating in Zoom.
Sorry, I had a little technical difficulty.
Not a problem, but thank you so much for being here. And before I call on Justin about this reciprocity, is there anything that you would like to comment on based upon what you've heard thus far? Either you agree or disagree, or any comments?
Yes, I think I agree with Tommy that the reciprocity is a good idea. And I also agree that we ought to consider expanding to other states if possible.
Okay. Justin.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment regarding this draft agreement with Louisiana, and Tommy kind of touched on it, continuing ed, we probably need to look at somehow considering. So obviously, I think at this point, this agreement just considers, okay, you're a journeyman, so this is the initial licensure. But I think for CE, we need to maybe look at reciprocity of that as well. And I know that, you know, as Tommy mentioned, you know, there is some crossover between which CE providers, you know, maybe both states will accept. But, you know, if we're going to look at true reciprocity, then I think, you know, allowing CE reciprocity is probably important too, because otherwise you're going to end up with these guys spending all their time in class rather than out in the field, and, you know, kind of defeat the purpose.
You know, I hear what you're saying. I think that's going to be a little problematic in that we have specific rules for our CE providers. But make no mistake about it. Once a Louisiana license holder is licensed in Texas as a journeyman plumber, he falls under exactly the same rules as a Texas tradesman who becomes a journeyman plumber. He takes our continuing education. He fulfills all the requirements. He gets the fingerprint program. So when he gets a license with us, he is in fact subject to every single rule, just like someone that came from a tradesman to a journeyman.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's great. And I'm not saying we should water that down, and it may be a secondary or more of a future conversation, you know, to be looked at after we look at the initial reciprocity, but we might want to consider, you know, looking at their CE requirements versus our CE requirements, identifying if there are any differences, and you know, making more of a concerted effort potentially to line those up.
Okay.
Going forward.
I hear what you're saying, but also understand that we've got a unique set of rules and regulations and approvals for our continuing education providers in Texas. But I think it's a point well taken. It's something we should look at. But I think it's kind of on the license holder. If once they come to Texas and they get a Texas journeyman's license, if that Louisiana license is that important to them that they can take the continuing education. If it's not, they can let it go. Like Tommy said, you know, some of them, you just don't want to travel all over the place. They might want to move to Texas and be a Texas plumber. So there's no need. But I hear what you're saying, but that's going to take some work beyond what we're going to do initially. So Lisa, did you have anything else to add on that?
We've had a little discussion about that off and on, and most people do say they just dropped the license, like Mr. Rice just mentioned, but Louisiana jumped on the CE so quickly, and just in visiting with them, that was kind of a topic of concern and consideration. And when we were talking about other states, Utah is another state that's very similar to us. And I have a couple of people that have reached out about Utah. So there's a lot going on, but I know exactly where he's headed to, and there's a little conversation in it. So as I have that information, I'll certainly bring it to you.
Okay. Board members, if there are other states,
board members, if there are other states that you think worthy of consideration that we look at for reciprocity agreements, feel free to share those with Lisa in the interim, as well as the public. I've had some input from public members of the public who had some really good ideas who hold multiple licenses. So if there's one that you think that should be taken in consideration, notify Lisa so that we can take a look at it and consider them in the future. And let's just see where this reciprocity agreement goes. We'll probably, by the time we have our next board meeting, have some kind of response back from them. And maybe a final document for you to take a look at. So any further discussion on the reciprocity agreement? Okay. Moving on to item number 9, discussion of outreach strategies, including town hall meeting. this is something that Lisa and I have talked about, and I want to communicate to the public that we realize with all of these rule changes and things going on at the agency, so many changes in continuing education, the renewal licenses, the endorsements, looks like a lot of balls in the air that it doesn't make a lot of sense. But I can assure you that I can see huge puzzle pieces, as can Lisa, and we've talked about it a lot. And these puzzle pieces are going to start coming together and fit together perfectly. But with that being said, Lisa is desirable of doing this, and I certainly support it and hope the board does too. Apparently, before this COVID business went on, they had an annual meeting of all the continuing education providers where every continuing education provider in the state could come together, meet with the agency, talk about issues that were facing them in continuing education, scheduling and reporting and things of that nature. And I want to commit to you in the first quarter of 2022, we're going to have just such meeting for our continuing education providers and instructors. So we are looking forward to that. And we hope by then, and Lisa's going to talk a little bit about it in her report about what we've done so far. But we hope by then to have an extremely clear picture that we can answer every question of every continuing education provider might pose to us. If not already implemented, I think we're going to be clear enough about how it's going to work to make that discussion. It'll also give us an opportunity to hear from you. What have we overlooked? What do we need to go back and make sure this works this way or that way? The one thing about these CE providers, I've never heard them for a loss for words. So I've got a feeling that when we have this meeting, we're going to provide plenty of time, because I got a feeling we're going to have an earful. But also, I want to let the CE providers as well as the plumbers know, and Lisa and I have talked about this as recently as this morning. During this transition period of time, this agency and this board is not going to be in the gotcha position. We're going to be extremely flexible in every rule that we have and every one that we do, because we realize this is a transition period. So I want to alleviate any concern from a plumber or from a continuing education provider that we're going to play gotcha, because we're not going to do that. One of the issues that was brought up to me is, here it is coming up on the first of the year, and what are we supposed to teach, or what are we supposed to provide? Well, keep in mind, we're still have in place the rule that was already in place, and that's the July to July thing. You've got PHCC, Matthew Wins, and the ICE program that's already been approved, and it's in effect until July. Lisa tells me that she's already ready to start receiving some new courses just to try to test the system. But to let you know that we are shortly after the first of the year going to have a meeting just with continuing education providers to answer every single question that you can pose. So get ready for it. We will do our best to be prepared to answer that. Probably have it in Austin. It'll be a really fun event, one that I'm looking forward to be honest with you. I can't wait to meet all the continuing education providers. You play such a key role in what we do. Furthermore, on our outreach, once we do that with our continuing education providers and board members, I want to ask your thoughts about this. Lisa and I have talked about putting the show on the road, and let's put together a series of 4 or 5 meetings across the state to meet with plumbers to answer their questions and let them voice their concerns, and meet directly with the plumbers. Let Lisa, 2 or 3 members of her staff, maybe a board member, put together a series of 4 or 5 meetings, and we'll figure out a way that Dawn and Kevin, maybe we can stream those meetings, or even if they can't attend the meetings in person, that plumbers can ask us questions about this new board and this new agency and this new direction that we're heading. Because all this doesn't do any good unless we communicate it. So, and one thing I was thinking about that kind of fits hand in hand, if we are, you know, we've already approved this high school curriculum program. What my thinking is, why would we not identify those high schools in the state that are interested in putting together a curriculum or a plumbing program to be licensed as tradesmen, and let's have our meeting at that high school and allow the professors, the teachers, the students, as well as the plumbers from that area come together and interact and get to know the board and let the students and the professors get to know the plumbers. What do you think?
I think that getting the parents involved.
Get the parents
Before
involved.
those kids get to the high school and get the program, let them know that that's an option.
I think it's an opportunity for us, not just to inform the plumbers, but also to recruit young people into the industry and let them actually come and interact with other plumbers and ask them what their job is and what opportunities are out there. What's it going to take to pass a test to the agency? So y'all, does anyone have any objection or concern about us heading in that direction? You know, I think what we can do is we can get TEA to identify those high schools who have intend to implement that program and try to strategically identify those that are in areas of the states that we can attract the most plumbers. And to be honest with you, if we do this correctly, we may fill up a high school auditorium with plumbers and students and professors and teachers and parents that are interested in their children pursuing this. So I think it can be a really home run for us. So just so the industry knows what we have planned for 2022, and believe it or not, it's on us before we know it. So, okay, any other comment or question on that? You know, we're now going to, that gets us through item number 9. And the next will be our proposed rule. It's 11 o'clock. And let's, with the board's permission, let's take about a 10-minute break. And when we come back, we will take up the rule proposals. After we finish our rule proposals, we'll probably break for lunch. I'll tell you later. We'll probably break for lunch. And after lunch, I'm going to do something I'm not looking forward to. But I'll let you know about that later. So it's 11 o'clock. Let's adjourn our meeting until 11:10, and we'll call it back to order. Before we get started with Helen, you'll get a well-needed break from me and a delightful intervention by Helen to talk about our rules today. Those of you who are present today, be sure that you sign in on our register over here before you leave today. So we'd appreciate you doing that. Board members, don't forget that when you're not talking to mute your device so that we don't get feedback. And with that being said, we're down to item number 10, which is our rules. So Helen, if you would just take it from here, starting with item number 10.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, board members. I know we have some new board members here, so if at any point you have any questions about the rulemaking process, I'm happy to stop and kind of give a fuller picture of what we're doing. But essentially, we propose rules. Those proposals can be amendments, a new rule entirely, or a repeal if it needs more than a tweak that would be called for with an amended rule. So there's proposed rules, those go to public comment for a period of time, and then they come back to us. Sometimes they go to the Office of Regulatory Compliance at the governor's office, and then eventually those come back to us. There's a few of those on the agenda as well. But once they've gone through those public comment periods and reviews, then they come back for adoption. So the first one on item agenda 10 is the adoption of a proposed repeal. So as most of you guys know, following the legislative session and HB 636, there were significant changes to the Texas Occupations Code, Chapter 1301. That's our plumbing license law. So the legislature gave us those directives that you heard the chairman talking about earlier. And by directives, I mean various rules for us to adopt, various tasks for us to undertake. And so along those lines, regarding the repeal of this rule, we're really doing a large scale overhaul with Rule 365.14. So we're doing away with the old rule. The new rule, however, that will replace this will implement new section 1301.4055. So that's new legislation drafted by the legislature to go into our code, the plumbing license law. And so this is the provision that will require the board to adopt rules. So that'll be the next thing we do. We'll adopt the rules that ensure licensees, registrants, and endorsement holders have at least 12 months to complete their continuing education or training program renewal requirements. So if anybody has any questions about the repeal, I'm happy to answer those.
Helen and board members, in plain English, basically, we are having to replace rules that we had in place and replace them with other rules. And Helen has worked really, really hard trying to work her way through this maze. And step one is we have to repeal or eliminate the rule, specifically 365.14. And Helen, am I correct about this, that this has already been proposed? It has gone through all the regulatory requirements and it's back to our board now for final adoption to repeal 365.14. Is that correct?
Yes, you are correct.
Okay. So board members, is there a motion under item number 10, which is found in tab 4 of your packet? Is there a motion to finally adopt this repeal of 365.14?
Milton Gutierrez, so moved.
Milton Gutierrez moves. Mark Sylvester seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Helen, you want to move on to item number 11?
Okay, yes. So this is the rule that's replacing the one you guys just adopted to repeal. So we've received a couple of comments about these. One concerned the term telecommunications. I want to say that telecommunications, that term was specifically chosen because it means communication at a distance, if you break it down into the etymology, and technology that deals with telecommunication. And so this was really selected, amongst other words, to future-proof the rule. Who knows what our continuing education will look like in the future? Maybe there'll be a virtual reality component to it where someone could, fit a pipe or braze something with a headset on and maybe specialized gloves. Who knows? But for now, we are moving. I think there were some comments made earlier about continuing education. We're moving towards an online sort of paradigm, moving into the future, and hopefully that'll accommodate our stakeholders better. Let me see, another comment suggested using the internet instead. The internet's actually kind of an example of telecommunications equipment networked together from around the world to form networks. It's not your internet browser. I know sometimes we colloquially use the internet that way. We also received a comment about whether this rule applied to both continuing education and training. The title does include the term continuing professional education programs and training programs. We made a slight tweak to subsection C to further clarify that the 12 months as provided by the legislature does apply to licensees and registrants who take the training programs. So if there's any questions about this rule, I'm happy to answer those. Otherwise, it's ready for final adoption by the board.
Members, to me, the most significant thing about this rule, it puts in place as permanent what was temporary, and that's these virtual training courses that were brought about as a result of the pandemic. Up until the pandemic and the necessity of having these virtual classes, we weren't allowed to do them. So this makes permanent the ability for continuing education providers to continue these virtual classes, which I think are a huge benefit to the industry, to the plumbers, to the continuing education providers, saves the plumbers the money and the time from traveling and maybe an overnight accommodation to attend a school. They can do it virtually, and this makes it a permanent part of our rules. Am I correct with that, Helen?
Yes, you are correct.
Okay. So with that being said, is there a motion for final adoption of proposed new rule for 365.14?
Justin McDonald, I make that motion.
Justin McDonald moves. Is there a second?
Dave Yelovich, second.
Second, Mr. Yelovich. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, board members, and Helen. Let's move to number 12.
All right, so this is an amendment to 365.15, and this relates to minimum curriculum standards. If I may borrow the chairman's metaphor from earlier about there being a puzzle piece and putting those together for the boards, I think this might be a corner piece. This is a significant change that I think will be beneficial to our CE providers, instructors, and of course our licensees and registrant holders. So this again implements legislative changes to sections of our plumbing license law. It required the board to establish minimum curriculum standards. Those are in subsection A. And then the executive director will approve those courses and training programs that meet the standards in subsection A that the board has set. Additional changes have been made here and there to implement some recommendations by the Sunset Commission, just to continue to streamline the process. We did receive a couple of different comments here. The first was about a different course being required for people who hold a registration as opposed to people who hold a license. Yes, there's two different statutes. There's 1301.404 and there's 1301.405. I know in the past, continuing education has lumped licensees and registrants together. We are separating them out. Not only is it required by statute that they are slightly different, but what is required to be taught to each population group is slightly different as well. And so courses tailored to registrants need to have registrants in those courses, and they need to meet the statutory criteria that is listed in those two different sections I mentioned of the Texas Occupations Code. For instance, I know board-approved plumbing codes are often covered in both, but really that's only required for registrants. It's not to say it couldn't be a part of the electives, but it's not necessarily required for licensees, while it is required for those registrants who are at the earlier part of their career. We also received some comments about courses that are taught by certain instructors or at certain educational institutions within the state, by certain other agencies. I would say we welcome those courses if they want to apply through the standard procedures. And part of that is because one of the criteria in subsection A is that the materials are teaching innovations, best practices, and keeping our licensees up to date. And so the courses that are listed in subsection E are really geared towards safety. We don't anticipate those changing as frequently. And if we have all the courses that are approved in subsection E, then it kind of does away with the board criteria in subsection A and the approval process. So we want those courses to continue to be innovative, to continue to update. And so what is in subsection E is mainly geared towards safety. I think, as Mr. McDonald and Mr. Rice pointed out, there should be some options for people who hold multiple licenses or licenses out of state. We want them to be able to take some national courses. And I think that's why the MedGas course was there. That was another comment we received if we were favoring the online. There's nothing in the rule that prohibits anything from being taken in person, virtually, or via correspondence. The board sees each of those as up to the licensee, how they would prefer to take their continuing education. But that national course put on by the international nonprofit that literally wrote the book on healthcare facilities, that satisfies a number of things, not just the curriculum standards, the instructor standards, but as well as having the security that the board knows and can verify that who is said to have taught the course and who is said to have taken the course can be easily verified on our end. So there are some pre-approved courses. Again, they focus on safety, and other courses really need to go through the standard approval process laid out in the earlier parts of the rule. And I think that's it for the comments that we received about this rule. There'll be a fuller explanation when this is published in the Texas Register, but if any board member has any questions or comments about the rule, let me know.
Board members, any questions of Helen? She is absolutely correct. When I speak of a puzzle, this is a corner piece of that puzzle. It's one of the most exciting portions that I think that we have accomplished in this. It's going to have the most direct effect on our plumbers. It is going to enable, and I hope that the continuing education providers see it this way. It is going to open up a whole new opportunity for continuing education providers to bring in new and innovative materials to plumbers outside the limited scope that was provided heretofore. We are, and Lisa and I again have talked about this, and Dawn, we're going to be extremely liberal in the types of courses that we allow to be taught as continuing education, provided they're going to have to meet a certain criteria. But this is a major shift, because up until this being implemented, there was a procedure in place that one time a year, you brought your material to the board and it was approved for a full year, and that was it. There was nothing else could be added. This change, and I think maybe Helen, it's included in this section, allows continuing education providers to bring us material at any time of the year, and for that to be approved by the executive director and not have to wait for a board meeting in order to approve the course. So it's going to streamline the course. It's going to provide those innovative continuing education providers to come up with new and innovative and interesting things for a plumber. And I've heard this said before, that some plumbers see 6 hours of continuing education as a sentence they have to serve in order to keep their plumbing license. This, I hope, is going to make this an interesting, innovative, something plumbers will look forward to. They know when they go, they're going to get fresh ideas, fresh material, and we are opening the door. And I think Lisa, even that we're not formally in place, I think she's receptive, she and Dawn, into receiving some proposed ideas or courses that you might have, so we can take a look at them and start the process. So, Helen, feel free to jump in if I've said anything that's incorrect?
No, that's correct. And I would just point out that the course materials will also be valid for 2 years going forward. So when they do submit it, the course providers can do it at any time during the year. It'll also be valid for a longer period of time to kind of coincide with some of the plumbing codes, as well as with the legislative session. So when you do that new course on significant changes brought to our code, you can feel satisfied knowing that it will be good until the next legislative session.
Board members, any questions or comments before we entertain a motion for adoption of this proposed amendment to 365-15?
I had a quick question for Helen.
Sure, Dave.
When reading toward the bottom, there's a kind of a comprehensive list of things like CPR class, first aid class, OSHA 10-hour class. Are those, would you have to take that through one of our providers? Or if I go online as a plumber and take a OSHA class, or if I go to, I don't know, my company offers a CPR class from the American Red Cross. Are those okay? Or do these have to just go a certain path?
No, these are pre-approved, so you can take it by virtually, virtually anyone that offers a Red Cross course. And part of the reason why we wanted to do that is because of the geographic diversity of Texas, as well as the language diversity that exists, and just the board's genuine focus on safety. And I would say the American Red Cross and OSHA, they both have really standardized certificates. And so it's very easy for the board to verify that the right person, the person who's listed on their website actually gave that course, that this is a valid certificate. You can go back and look at that date. And so there's kind of some built-in security by selecting these organizations that, we were very intentional with our selection. So anyone who offers that OSHA 10, you can take it, it'll count. Something we might think about in the future, obviously 10 hours is more than the 6 required. Do we want to do rolling CE to where the credit, those excess 4 hours maybe go towards the next year? I don't know. That'll be for the future, but we're really opening up our minds and being receptive to other ideas about CE.
Any other questions or comments from the board members? Is there a motion for final adoption of the proposed amendments concerning section 365-15?
Dave Yelovich, so moved.
Mr. Yelovich moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Gutierrez, second. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's a big one, and that's one that's going to affect our plumbers themselves, our continuing education providers. And I think everyone is, when the dust settles, they're going to love this. It's going to be a good thing for the plumbing industry. So, Helen, you want to go
Yes.
forward with item number 13?
Yes, let's keep on moving. Okay, so this rule 365.5, this is one that went to the Regulatory Compliance Division. They found that our new rule replacing the repealed rule is consistent with state policy, and we received no comments on either the repeal or the new rule. The new rule is necessary because the legislature changed us from a 3-year renewal cycle for endorsements to a 1-year renewal cycle that will renew with the underlying license. So the new rule, after the repealed rule goes away, will implement section 1301.401 of the Texas Occupations Code. If anybody has any questions about repealed 365.5 or new rule 365.5, I'm happy to answer those.
Questions from the board? Mr. McDonald.
So this is just to bring us in conformance with the statutory changes, correct?
Yes,
That
Okay.
is correct. Helen is confirming that's correct.
yes. I think it kind of streamlined as well. You know, we're trying to, while we're doing what we need to meet the legislative requirements, we're also under rule review. And so, you know, I wouldn't say that there's not other tweaks that have been made, trying to simplify the language and just make it as clear cut as possible for our licensees, ease of reading it.
This is all a part of the efficiencies that Sunset pointed out to us 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Up until this point, everyone's license renewed annually, but yet if they had an endorsement, that was every 3 years. It was on a different date. So the staff is having to look at these one license holder sometimes 2 or 3 times over a course of a year, because they had their regular license was they had 3 endorsements. So this combines them, that all those endorsements will expire on the same time as your initial license does. So it goes to the efficiency of the agency. Now we can look at that license one time and approve not just your renewal license, but also all of your endorsements at one time. So that's going to really stretch and expand the capability of our licensing staff who are charged with that responsibility. And trust me, that's a big one. When we've got like 100, almost right at 98,000 or 100,000 licenses that 3 or 4 people look at every single year. When you cut down on the number of times they have to look at a license, that helps us, and it allows them to have more capability. And again, in order to get this done, this particular rule that I would entertain a motion for repeals the old rule, which was the annual and the 3-year endorsement rule. It wipes that out so that we can replace it with what's coming up next. So is there a motion to adopt this rule repeal of 365.5?
Justin McDonald, sorry, I did jump ahead earlier, but I'll make a motion for that repeal now.
Great.
Mark
Mr.
Sabasik,
McDonald
second.
moves. Is there a second? Okay, Mark Savasti is second.
Yes.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Helen, it's all yours.
All right, so 365.5, this is the new rule that will coincide the endorsements with the underlying license and implement the new rule per those legislative changes. That's ready for adoption.
Helen, this basically allows a new rule which will call for the endorsements as well as the license to fall on the same date. Is that this replaces the one that we just repealed, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Item number 14 on your agenda, tab 8. Is there a motion to approve our new rule 365.5?
Ron Ainsworth, so moved.
McDonald, second.
Mr. Ainsworth moves, Mr. McDonald seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Moving on out to item number 15, 365.24. Helen?
Yes, this is a new rule that we created earlier. Earlier rules provided for exemptions to continuing education and training. They were kind of lumped in a rule. This will be a separate rule, so the title in the administrative code will be easily searchable if someone's looking to see if the exemption applies to them. There's provisions in our plumbing license law that allow for the board to exempt certain persons. We didn't receive any comments on this rule, but the Regulatory Compliance Division did find that this rule was consistent with state policy. So it is good to go and ready to be adopted if y'all so choose.
Helen, does this primarily relate to military service? Those in military service being exempt from continuing education?
I would say that's a large component. There's kind of some interacting statutes, and the way we chose to harmonize them was just to simplify the process. The Texas Occupations Code Chapter 55 provides for military service members to have a longer length of time. However, that kind of butts up against our requirement that if you haven't been licensed in about 2 years, if you've been expired for over 2 years, that your license just goes poof. So this really protects those service members who are serving for longer than 2 years, which is most people who are in military service. And so we want to keep them kind of in the fold within the board. We want to welcome them back when they complete their service. And so this is just an easier way for them, we hope, to do that. It also applies to board staff who will review CE materials in depth, and course instructors. They have traditionally been exempted because they spend so much time working in continuing education anyways. There's not a huge benefit to them attending those additional 6 hours.
Helen, I have a question for you. There is work to be done with respect to exemptions from continuing education. One of the things that came out of our meeting with TEA and State Board of Education and the Higher Education Coordinating Board, one of the requirements for high school is that that course be taught by a licensed plumber, or at least wise they or an advisor, not necessarily taught, but they certainly have to participate in the curriculum and the teaching of the course by a licensed plumber. And as such, they will be exempt from continuing education if they're doing that, as an incentive for them to get involved in the high school programs. Helen, is this the section that at some point we'll need to develop some rules to identify those exemptions, or is it going to be elsewhere in our rule package?
Well, it's really up to you. I think it's certainly possible that we add in a subsection and make those instructors who qualify, those volunteers, exempt under this rule. We could just easily add that in. Or it might, if we're having a rule about the high school programs or the trade school programs and who's exempt under those, it might make sense to put it there. So it'll really be up to the board. We could also, there's no harm in putting it in 2 places. So we might end up doing that.
I guess the point I want to make is, to those who might be listening, we are aware of the exemptions that have to be provided under this high school and trade school program to plumbers who help and participate. And just because we are adopting this particular rule right now, outlining these exemptions, that doesn't mean we're finished. We've still got work to do to include in our rules that exemption for those plumbers that are helping out with high school programs. So at some point in time, as Helen suggested, we'll either add it here or we'll add it in both places or a separate section. But this is not an exhaustive list of the exemptions that will be implemented in the near future. So with that explanation, board members, is there a motion for final adoption of Rule 365.24?
Mr. Gutierrez, so moved.
Mr. Gutierrez moves. Is there a second?
Aaron Black, second.
Mr. Black seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Helen. This is going to be an interesting one.
Right. I think I'm going to skip the fees for now. I'm going to leave that to Lisa to discuss. I think it's for a discussion item and also for the board. So I'm going to do the last rule that I worked on, which was 365.22. And this is agenda item 17. And it currently relates to just licensing procedures for military spouses. This is a rule for proposal for public comment. So it's at the earlier part of the rulemaking process. It was initially identified by the Regulatory Compliance Division as anti-competitive when we initially proposed the rule review. And so, we kind of took that as a heads up that they wanted some changes. And in looking at the rule, we've made several amendments, and those have been made to remedy some of those longstanding issues we've had with continuing education being overly prescriptive. And at the same time, we're broadening the rule to apply not only to military spouses, but to military service members and military veterans as well. So I think I mentioned Chapter 55 of the Texas Occupations Code earlier. It applies to all state agencies that issue licenses, and it concerns military service members, military veterans, and military spouses, and provisions that apply specifically to those persons. So this rule will cover everyone and all the rules required under Chapter 55. If anybody has any questions, let me know and we can take a look at it.
Any questions of Helen? Mr. McDonald?
I just want to be sure I'm reading it right. So basically this says if a military member or a veteran or a spouse of one of those people moves to Texas and has a license in another state, that we will accept that license. Is that kind of, am I reading that correctly?
Yes, I want to say there's a couple of provisions. Either they had a Texas license within the last 5 years, or we determined that their out-of-state license is substantially similar to a Texas license. I know earlier y'all were talking about reciprocity with other states. I think, again, someone mentioned a case-by-case basis. I think that's really true, because not only do the criteria vary from state to state, but also, you know, at different times, the criteria probably varied within a single state. And so that is the approach we're taking in this rule, to look at it on a case-by-case basis. I would say, you know, it'll probably be a test plus so many years of experience if we feel like their test isn't quite as comprehensive as ours is. And I think that's always been my understanding, that our test is far more robust than any other state. So maybe it's a pride thing. It's hard to say that there are other states that have substantially similar, but I think we fill in that gap with terms of experience in the field. Okay, does anyone else have any other questions? I hope that answered you, Justin.
Any other questions of Helen? And as I understand it, board members, the difference and the distinction between what we've done up to this point to this rule is being approved for publication in the Texas Register. It's not for final adoption. It is, we are approving this rule to be posted in the public register for 30 days for public comment. After such time, I'm assuming it will go through the regulatory compliance division of the governor, and then eventually come back to our board, maybe while I'm still alive, for final adoption.
Mr. Chairman, your video is turned off.
Oh, okay.
I guess I
He
would
was telling me
say,
my video was turned off. I'm sorry about that, folks. But at any rate, this particular vote is to approve the publication in the Texas Register for public comment. And after it's worked its way through the system, will eventually come back to us for final adoption. So is there a motion that we make this proposal for public comment for 36522?
Aaron Black, so moved.
Darren Black moves, Mr. Sylvester seconds that this rule be approved for publication for public comment in its current form. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much, Helen. You always do such an excellent job for us and bring clarity to everything. So thanks so much, not just for your work, but for your presentation today.
thank you.
But I do notice that you skillfully skirted around item number 16. So,
Yes, I was gonna say, we can certainly get into that. I just, I don't want to steal Lisa's thunder, because I think it involves kind of some exciting news about computer-based testing and where we're going forward. And so there'll be different fees associated with that. But Lisa's been working on that for years, along with Robbie, who unfortunately is no longer with us. So I'm just going to let her take over.
Thanks, Ellen, and thanks again for all your work. Lisa, would you like to talk about this for a moment?
Bottom line, it's good news. I'm gonna let Lisa do it.
Okay, I'm unmuted
We're back
now.
on item number 16.
Okay, I'm unmuted now, so I think you can hear me okay. What we have is an amendment to the rule, which actually tags on to the fact that the endorsements will renew at the license. The endorsements will renew every year. In addition to all of that, and to use another Frank or Mr. Denton term, all the balls in the air, we had to remove the fee. So there's no longer going to be a fee for the renewal of the endorsement. The initial fee will remain in place for any type of endorsement, med gas, WSPS, fire sprinkler. But the renewal is gone. So anyone that holds any of those endorsements, that's a significant savings every year to them, or every 3 years to them. But the license no longer is held up. And to put all of these pieces together, it doesn't happen at the same time. Some people that have endorsements will notice that the date to their endorsement is gone from the license card just in the last month or two. Prior to that, some of the fees were gone. They're all gone. It's a lot of parts to get the license card to print out, the computer to understand, the pay to get the fix, and all of this thing. And this is one of the last parts to make this whole deal roll. So no more fees on the renewal of an endorsement.
At our last meeting, a member of the public, when we talked about aligning the endorsements with the renewal of the license, one of the members of the public questioned, well, does that mean we're going to have to pay that renewal fee 3 times every time? In other words, I was paying $50 every 3 years. That means I'm going to have to pay $50 every year that I endorse? Well, the answer to your question is no. And furthermore, you're not going to have to pay a dime for that renewal on your endorsement. Just to reiterate what Lisa is saying, let's say you've got a journeyman license, pick med gas as an endorsement, then you will pay to get that med gas endorsement for your test and for all it requires to get a med gas endorsement. Once that med gas endorsement is obtained by you and those dates are aligned, it'll be renewed at the same time as your license. Then you will, the second time around, you won't owe anything on that endorsement. You'll just pay for your license, which will include any, and if you've got 3 endorsements, you get 3 exemptions. If you have 1 endorsement, you get 1. So basically you're getting a free ride after the first time. And that is an example of where efficiencies in our agency can and should be passed along to the people that are paying the bill. And that's the license holders. I believe it's 90% of our revenue comes from the license holders, from licensing, and only 5% comes from examinations and other fees. So we have sufficient funds. And Lisa, I'm going to ask you the amounts that this is going to cost us by eliminating these renewal fees. Lisa has calculated the exact cost that it's going to cost our agency. I have confirmed with Richard that it's well within our means to do it. It is consistent with the governor's direction 2 years ago that we work to lower licensing fees. So with all these things said, I cannot imagine who's going to complain about not having to pay for an endorsement. Now, there's probably somebody out there, but I don't know who it would be that's going to say free is a bad thing. Of course, there's nothing free. I don't mean it's free, but you will pay for the initial endorsement. But going forward after that, because we're able to look at them one time and not 2 or 3 times, it cuts our costs, and those costs should be passed along to the people that are paying it. And that's the license holder. So that's what we're proposing to do. The reason Helen so skillfully skirted this issue is because, board, I'm going to ask you to do something today that Vina, where is she still on there? I can't see her picture, but Vina and
I'm
Helen
here.
are pulling their hair out. What I would like for you to do today is for the board to approve the repeal of these renewal licenses where they will go away. It's not in final form that it can be proposed on the register. What I would like for the board to do is to ask every question you want to ask about it, get any information you need, but not just to approve it, but to authorize the staff to put it in final legal form for public comment. And keep in mind, I'm extremely comfortable. Lisa's already got a template of something that's okay with me, but it needs legal scrutiny, and I'm okay with that too. But keep in mind, it's posted for public comment. We got to start the process. And if we post it for public comment, you are still going to get another bite at the apple because it's not in effect until we finally adopt it at our next board meeting. So,
Mr.
Lisa, if you will
Chairman,
give us some of the cost of what this is going to cost us, and then I'm going to ask the board to approve the staff going forward, posting it in final, it will authorize them to put it in final legal form for public posting for comment. So, Lisa, what's it going to cost us?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
can we make that
I know, Vina,
contingent?
go ahead.
Can we make that contingent upon legal review?
Yeah, absolutely.
It is, yeah.
Absolutely. Vina, thank you for saying that. And I intended to say that all of this is going to have to be put in legal form. What's customary is us approving it and authorizing them to put it in legal form for public posting. But I see no downside to doing it because we're going to get another bite out of the apple to take a look at it before it's finally adopted anyway. And like I say, we're eliminating fees, so who's going to complain about it? So, Lisa, what is the cost for?
Typically every year we would collect anywhere from 30,000 to 38,000 a year, but over a 5-year period, an average would be about 27,916. Richard worked this up in detail, so that's an average. It's not a whole lot of money unless you had a whole lot of people that were late every year, so it's not significant. And I wanted to add, can I add one other thing that everyone might want to consider? We had originally thought about making some changes to the format, the way the fees are laid out in the board rule. And we've determined it would be much easier to read if we put a graphic in there that's a chart. So I put a draft of a chart. And so if anyone has an opinion on whether they like line by line or a chart of what it takes to renew, examine, renew, initial, late, so on and so forth. So we've got it. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Vina here. I just have one question. Is the board proposing just to eliminate the endorsement fees and nothing else?
No,
We are not proposing to eliminate the endorsement fees. What we're proposing is that the renewal be repealed.
Yes,
not the
I'm sorry.
endorsement fee.
Yes, that's
They
correct.
will
That's what I
still
meant.
pay when they have a journeyman or master. They come in for an endorsement for med gas or whatever it is.
Initial.
They pay the same fee that they're paying today. The difference is when that's up for renewal 12 months from now, they only pay for their initial license. They do not pay for the renewal. So Vina, yes, it is that. It's not the endorsement fee, it's the renewal of the endorsement fee, correct, Lisa?
That's correct.
And it costs us $25,000 or $30,000. we've got an excess $500,000 or $600,000. We're raising more than what it's costing us to run this agency. We anticipate additional revenue coming in because of these additional folks that we're doing. So it's not going to have an impact on our financial standing. And I'm anxious to get this in the pipeline and get it going. As you have heard, it takes us 60 days to get a rule with nobody else. And now he added an additional 90 days of regulatory compliance. And I'm ready to get it in the pipeline and get it going. So that's why I'm asking you to approve the repeal of the renewal endorsement fees for all license holders. Any more? Feel free to object to it, or it's something I would like to do, and I would hope that the board would support, but you tell me what you want to do.
I've got a question.
Sure.
Considering med gas endorsement requires a CE every 3 years, are we waiving that CE requirement or?
No, sir. It doesn't affect any CE requirement at all.
So that's the responsibility of that endorsement holder to make sure that his CE is being met during the same time period.
Just like it always has.
Okay.
This has nothing to do with CE requirements. It strictly relates to the amount of money they pay whenever they renew that endorsement. So is there a motion to post for public comment the repeal of the fee for renewal endorsements for all license fees?
And that's contingent upon legal review, Mr. Chairman.
Please, contingent upon legal review. I laugh, and Vina and I pick at each other all the time. She's really working to our best interest. She's trying to look after us. And I know I drive you crazy, Vina, and I'm sorry. But
She can submit a comment.
yeah, one of our board members said, Vina, you're welcome to make a comment during public posting. So no, Vina, it is obviously going to be put in legal form for public posting, and obviously will come back for us for final adoption before it's final. But I just want to start the process. So is there a motion, or was there a motion? Mr. McDonald?
I make a motion that we approve the amendments to section 361.6 relating to fees for publication for public comment subject to legal review.
Second.
Motion by Mr. McDonald, second by Mr. Rice. Put in the absolutely proper form, subject to legal reviews. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. All those, wait, one more before we vote. Lisa, you had another.
And was there a preference on the chart or the line by line?
I like the graphic. I like the chart.
Okay, good.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Now, if our legal folks will do their job and they'll put it in the proper form, they won't have to come back to us at our next board meeting to redo this again. So I have a lot of confidence in the ability of our staff and our legal people to put this in such a way that they're comfortable with public posting. And so we won't have to look at it again until final adoption. Thank you, board members, and thank you, staff, and thank you, Vina, for all that you do. I also should say I want to thank the Regulatory Compliance Division of the Governor's Office. There were 2 or 3 of these rules that they really took out of order so that we could go ahead and implement these. And I tell you, I really do appreciate the Governor's Office expediting these so that we could get them going. We've got so many things going on, and we've been an agency under siege for years. So we have a sense of urgency to try to get some of this stuff done and not to try to get it there as quickly as possible. So thanks, Julie and the regulatory agency staff with all that. Let's try to get a couple more things before we break for lunch. I think I guess we're at the executive director's report, are we not? So it's 5 minutes after 12. Lisa, is there something you wanted to cover before we break for lunch? Is there something I want to cover?
Would you like for me to cover the exam information now before lunch, or you want me to hold it till afterwards?
If you don't mind, let's hold that until after lunch.
Okay, I'm good. Then all of mine can wait, because I've got a list that's gonna roll from one thing to the other.
Okay, I'm going to warn everybody. I said I was going to do something this afternoon that's kind of out of character for me. We're going to break for lunch, and basically our staff reports will come after lunch. Our staff has for every year participate in a charitable contribution program where we ask members of the staff to make a contribution through payroll deduction toward a statewide charitable fund that all state agencies participate. And we've been very successful in years past, and we've had some additional staff come on. And I made the mistake of shooting my mouth off to Lisa that if we have 100% participation, that I would participate in whatever they wanted me to do. And they've decided they wanted to dress me for the board meeting. So I haven't seen it yet, but I understand I have a special hat that I'm to wear this afternoon. And I was told to pack a pair of shorts and a pair of cowboy boots. So the good news is that our staff, and I'm thankful to every one of you for 100% participation in our charitable giving. I also got some news for the board. As a part of that, I also committed all of our board to a $20 contribution toward that. And I went ahead and made it. And our two newest board members have already paid me back, but the others have not. So at your convenience, if you would give me that $20 contribution that you made, the good news is that I'm buying lunch. So you're not just wasting your money. Lunch is on me today. So we will, it's about 7 minutes after 12. Let's break until 1 o'clock for lunch. And then when we come back, I've tried to get the serious part of the agenda out of the way to try to have some kind of decorum. I have no idea how I will return. Lisa, do you have something else?
Well, I was just gonna add quickly, we do have one of our new staff members, and this is Blanca Alvarez, and she's going to work in the licensing department, and she's still in training. And I actually have another person that just started yesterday, but I'm gonna save her till the next meeting because she's training. So we've made her endure all of this so you don't have to come back afterwards. But she's going to be working in the licensing department. She's bilingual. She comes from an industry that she had been at for quite a while. So she's got endurance, and that's what we need. So we're happy to have her. And I want
You'll
to
be a real hero among licensing. They need you worse than a
absolutely.
dead man needs a coffin. They really need some help back there.
And I want to say is we did ask Frank if he wanted to do a dunk tank. That didn't go over good, or shave his head, and he said no. So we came up with the next best thing that staff voted on, and so you'll get to see it because we are a team. That's a hint.
The things I don't do. It is 9 minutes after 12.
Clock, and true to my word, here I am with the outfit that the plumbing board staff has so graciously picked out for me. Congratulations, staff, on 100% participation in our charitable campaign. I was telling everyone earlier that I am really concerned about those that were tuning in online and didn't decide to do it until 1 o'clock. They missed the opening session. Justin McDonald, one of our board members, made a statement that he says the governor's office is tuned in and all other state agencies are watching. He says, I'm looking forward to our new board member once this gets out. So, Lisa, bring some sanity to this insanity, please, with your report. please talk about the charitable campaign so everybody will know what I'm doing. Please.
Thank you, Chairman.
You use the term lightly.
Let me turn my video back on too. See if I can do this without busting out in laughter, but Mr. Denton so graciously agreed to go above and beyond in helping us in our charitable fund campaign that we ended up with 100% participation from staff. And we had a nice pot of money to donate, and we sent a portion of it to St. Jude's. And I also want to give a shout out to Debbie White, because Debbie did a lot of work on putting our team together. And so that's actually what the theme for the whole program was football. So hence the reason why Frank has this giant football on his head, because he truly is a great team member. And so we kicked him around quite a bit, and now we're going to toss him around today. So thank you very much, Mr. Denton, and all the board members that contributed to, and staff. We had an outstanding year and a lot of fun. And I want to go ahead and
Lisa, before you leave that subject, I have to tell the listening audience, those who are not here, I've already told the ones that are here, I wish you could have seen the look on the face of those who are being tested today when I walked through the examination area. And these guys that are plumbers that are over here trying to test for journeyman and master, you know, they just kind of looked at me and they shook their head and they said, just another retired plumber, just crazy, you know. So at any rate, here we go. May I put this right here while I'm listening? It's a little warm on my head, so I'll put it back on.
okay. Yeah, because some of the staff would still like to see it too.
Well, I'm going to wear it all afternoon, so I'll stay here and pose as long as you want me to.
I want to mention, someone's not muted. I'm getting feedback. Okay, here we go. One of the personnel changes, and one of the things that's always on my list, it has to do with personnel. And I got to say, with regret, but much blessing to her, Helen Kelly, who has so graciously helped us through a can of worms, is going to be leaving the agency, and she's done a tremendous job on this portion of the rules, and so she will be missed. And I mentioned earlier, we do have some new folks, and we're going to continue to get a few more new folks. So our team is growing. It's very exciting. We still have a job posting for an investigator and an examiner out on our website. So take a look at those. They're great, exciting jobs. As you can see, it'd be a great team to join. We're a lot of fun. We do a lot of work too. So take a look at those. One of the big topics that I want to mention is the computer-based testing. We got our RFP done, our proposal for the project. Helen was instrumental in getting that written. That's no small feat either. It's got a lot of legal items in it, but we were able to get all that process done, and we have awarded the contract to Pearson VUE. They do a lot of testing for several other agencies within the state. There's still much work to be done, and so I don't have a lot of the details on it yet, but we're very excited. And I don't want anybody for a moment to think, because it's going to become a computer that you're sitting in front of instead of filling out a piece of paper, that it's going to be any less rigorous than it is already. So it'll be exciting. The other thing is the not having to travel here, being able to, you know, go down the street to a computer testing center. It's going to save some gas. It's going to save some folks some time. So that's very exciting. And the biggest thing that's going to occur is you'll need to be ready whenever you send your application in, because there won't be any waiting. you'll be within a few days. Once you get processed, there'll still be a process and an approval period. Once you get processed and approved, you'll be able to pick your day and where you want to go take your computer-based examination. So very exciting. And you've got to consider, we've spent a good deal of time over the last few years thinking that eventually we would get the authority to do this, and what would we move over there and what would we change. And so we've experimented physically and on paper with some changes to the exam. And we know now that we have a really good idea of everything that would be sufficient to test an individual. And it'll be very much the same, but it is going to be a little different format than people are accustomed to. You'll be, clicking on a button, basically, and whenever they get done with the exam, they'll know whether they pass that written portion, and that written portion will need to be passed prior to taking the practical exam. So it's a big jump. It's coming. I hope I have even more details the closer we get to the first of the year. We've got a lot of things pinned down. The other item that I have been working on quite a while is is a new continuing education credit upload program. And you have to imagine all these things are going on simultaneously. I go back to Frank's balls in the air, but it's a whole lot of stuff to make all the pieces work. And so when we'll have some much needed roundtables or whatever you want to call them, meetings, and they'll be helpful for the providers and for the instructors. And then we'll get out and we'll do some outreach to the plumbers as well. So it's going to be an exciting time in the first quarter of the year. And let's hope we have really good weather this year, that we don't have a funny January, February situation. So, but the new program is going to allow for less than 6 hour increments to be put in to meet the total of the 6 hours for each year to renew a license. So it's going to be a little different. You're going to have new accounts, a lot of new stuff going on all at one time. And a couple of other states are using this particular CE program. And so we're looking at some of the out-of-box stuff that they are using. And so at that point, we might learn of some other similarities in any continuing education that people have. License renewal date, we sent out an email to inspectors not too terribly long ago and said that some changes to the renewal to the inspector license are coming. And one of those functions is about to be in place. We've got a little more testing that we have to do, but the inspectors that do not have any other license, their renewal date is going to move to a randomized date throughout the year. And I'll just say it is people that have multiple licenses, people that only have one licenses, it's going to be randomized. There's going to be some people that are going to get pushed a little bit forward, some that might get 1 month push forward, some might get 6 months. So it's a random act of a computer system. But the individuals that currently hold multiple licenses, that's an inspector that also holds a plumbing license. The plumbing license and the inspector license will renew in the same month. And the same situation that applies right now, if you renew your inspector license because that's what you're utilizing, then your other plumbing license will come along with it. And it's all going to occur in the same month. Bear in mind that these fixes that go into the system or enhancements that go into the system, they don't all happen at one time. So this is a big switch to flip, so to speak. And we really expect it all to work in the latter part of January for the inspectors. Later on, the plumbers will see some changes, not in their renewal dates, but in the due date of their continuing education, because the big movement there is you're not going to be stuck to that July, June situation. It's going to be, you're going to be remembering a calendar year, an easy 12-month period. There's January to December. So won't that be amazing? I don't know if we can reteach that, but we're going to try. It's going to be exciting. So a lot of changes, and you'll have to have some patience with us. I can tell you that. So that's one of the things. Med gas, someone brought up something about med gas, and I wanted to touch on that in addition to the renewal of the license and the renewal of the endorsement. A med gas endorsement, there's no more of this, oh, I want to drop it because I can't get my med gas and I want to do this and then I'm coming back. And I mean, that med gas is dependent upon that license renewal regardless, always has been. But if the required CE is not in there, the whole thing's going to be expired. So that's something that you really got to remember. But Mr. Black used the word responsible, and he wasn't talking about the master plumber. He was talking about the licensee being responsible. So the licensee is going to have to know, oh, I still need to get my med gas every 3 years. And there'll be some opportunities for med gas to easily be obtained and or, you know, taken at a different time, depending upon how the providers bundle their classes together. It's going to all work out quite well. Anyway, and also I will send this out to the providers in the next few days. We put together every continuing education provider that submitted the classes that were taken last year and the number of students that attended. I'm not going to read the entire report. I'll send it out to you. But the number of students that show to be attended based on the people that did report, and the majority, everybody in this room did, I can tell you that, was 18,359. So maybe a little less than we had the year before, because we had some replacement CEs that were still going on, and there was a whole lot of correspondence classes and that sort of thing. So the last 2 years of this CE have been a little bit different. And some people, it looks like maybe did not do any classes during the pandemic. So anyway, lot going on. I will also say that the license renewals continue to be way up there. At the end of our fiscal year, which was August 31st, we were at 75,282 on individuals. So it may take a little bit of a dive during December. It usually does, and then it'll come right back up. So pretty exciting, a whole lot going on. One of the things that did concern me whenever I was running reports and Richard and I were putting together some statistical data, is that last month when we had was it last month or September? No, September. We had a meeting. We looked at the number of people that are scheduled for an exam, and the number of retakes that were scheduled for an exam contained 27% of those people that needed another shot at the exam. So we put all these numbers together again. There was 600 and some odd last meeting. There's 718 people waiting to take the exam right now. But out of that, 34.7% of them are retakes. And some of them, there's 163 of them that are 2 times or more. There's 44 that are 3 times, and it just goes on. So there's some missed opportunity for preparation to take and pass the examinations, what that tells us. So we were a little bit disappointed that that didn't go back down, but it will. It'll get better. It'll get there. I know there's some really good education out there, and sometimes I think it's better just to take a deep breath, and they need to sit down and take the time to learn what good quality plumbing is. It's no sense rushing through it, because it's an expensive undertaking to take the exam 2 or 3 different times.
Hey, Lisa, can I
Yes,
pitch
sir.
something in here?
Yes, sir.
You know, the one thing, and it is concerning, and it does take up a lot of time, these retakes, but I think we should anticipate 65 to 75% pass rate on these going forward. If we ever get to 100%, it tells me we need to reevaluate what we're doing back there and take a look at our test, because I don't find a 70 or 75% pass rate unacceptable. Board members, do you feel that way? I think if we start seeing 95 or 100% pass rate, I would say we need to tighten up our test a little bit.
You're absolutely correct. We had participated in studies off and on over the years, and 70 to 72% is really kind of an optimal situation.
You know, I know you're not supposed to use the TDLR word, but when I was chairman of TDLR, it was consistently 75%, 70%. Some of the programs were even 50%. So we were all over the board, but we were never above 90 or 95%.
We never have
I think
been.
when it is, we need to be concerned. The other thing I want to tell you about the computer-based testing, throw this in. Lisa we've got a lot of capabilities on this computer-based testing. They do psychometric testing and evaluation of our test questions and which ones they're missing. We bought the bare bones minimum, or contracted for the bare bones minimum to provide these tests. But there are layers that we could add on, and Lisa and I have talked, we plan to add them on as time goes on, that we can refine these questions to do these psychometric tests to make sure that we're stating it clearly. If we see one question on the exam that's missed 90% of the time, we need to take a look at it and see what we're doing. If we find one that nobody ever misses out of 10,000 people, everybody got it 100%, you know, we need to know those things. But there are layers of sophistication that we'll be able to add on as we go forward, as well as Neil always told me this. It was a dream of his, and I know it is of Lisa's. I can see us having 200 or 300 appropriate tests that are test questions that are fully vetted, and we start scrambling those on every test for every applicant. Each applicant won't get the same number of questions or the identical questions. So there are a lot of opportunities for us to fine tune this. Lisa has hit on the most obvious is there will be no wait time. In many cases, there will be no travel time. There will be no expense to the plumber for overnight accommodations. So it's a win-win all the way around for all of us. And before I leave that, Lisa, Dawn, and Kevin, because they're sitting here, I'll call their name. There are lots of others, have just worked feverishly for the last 2 or 3 months trying to put all these things together. But I think it needs to be said, we've got 35 other employees in the agency that have worked hard to keep the train on the tracks while we're doing all these things. And it's not an easy task. And we owe them a huge debt of gratitude and thanks because they have worked their fingers to the bone. We don't stop what we're doing in order to work on these new programs. We got to keep going and keep rolling. These volumes keep coming in. So there are a lot of staff folks that have really stepped up to the plate and kept the train on the tracks while we're doing these modifications. And Lisa, I want to thank you. You work more harder than anybody I've ever seen. I mean, I know a lot of people do, but I have personal knowledge of Lisa. Lisa and I talk all the time, and this has really been a monumental task, putting this computer test program out to bid, trying to work out all the details of the programming. It has been a monumental task. And, you know, fortunately, you've got a really good support staff to help, but I want to thank you personally for the work that you've done on this. And thank Helen. the legal aspect of this bid process was much larger than I ever anticipated. And we couldn't have done it without her, and we appreciate it. So the incremental gains that we made while Helen was here is very much appreciated and will always be remembered. So
Absolutely.
I don't mean to interrupt your train of thought, but
No, that's fine. The exams we've been focused on for quite a while, and we feel like we've got a good selection of questions right now, and we'll have some additional reporting capabilities we haven't had. There's just a lot of stuff that's real exciting right now. So, and I do have a really good team right now, and I want to keep it that way. I want to add to it. So look at those applications out there. We also, and I don't want to miss this, we have 3 individuals that are going to become CPE instructors. One is Michael Rulin for APHCC, Michael Chrisman for Mendias, and Jose Davalos for Mendias. And I need to get those approved. This will be probably some of the last approvals on instructors that you'll have to do, but they have all their qualifying papers and documents and all of that, and they've paid their fee. So that does require a motion on number 20, tab 14. So I
board
need
members,
that.
you've heard the names and you've got in your packets the qualifications and applications. Is there a motion to approve the individuals identified?
Justin McDonald, I'll make a motion to approve Michael Ruland, Michael Chrisman, and Jose Davalos as CPE providers, instructors.
Is there a second?
Ron Ainsworth, second.
Ron Ainsworth seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think I got most everything, but I'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone has. It's a lot of information. I certainly won't swear to have every single answer, but we're getting close.
Any questions of Lisa, especially the new board members? It's nothing. We don't have any secrets, so there's nothing off limits. Okay, Dave.
Get over there. Okay. On when we clicked on our tab 12, we had all the numbers and stuff. And am I not on? Okay. I'm good. Okay. And I was just curious. I went down to a report. I don't know if this is coming, but it's under this tab. The field summary report. Field activity summary report through August 31st. And I'm just curious if you could help me define what is a compliance check, and then just looking at the numbers relating to compliance checks, how do we end up at the potential violations found? It just seems to be all over the board. Can you just explain to me what these types of violations are and what is a compliance check?
Back on. Sorry about that.
I gotta turn off.
Yeah, now I'm on. A compliance check is any time that we go out on a job site, whether it be through a receipt of a complaint or randomly out checking a particular area, we're going to go on that job site and determine whether or not that job site's in compliance. So that number of penalties that you have, it's not going to correspond to the number of compliance checks you do in any way. It's a different collection of data and numbers, if that's kind of where you're going. An investigation of a complaint, I think that number is in there as well. Those are going to vary because you might go out to a particular area and go out on a job site and do a compliance check and do 20 of them at one time in one area. And a lot of that is randomly done. And I left those reports in there, particularly for some of the board members that haven't had a chance to look at them. that is year-end stuff that the data that the enforcement department puts together. So I left those in there, and they were in there last time too. But it's good to know, good to look at. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I was just looking at the ones with 400. You follow those across, and there's a 0 that's 400, and it's like 55, and it just, like I said, and the numbers are all over. We have some folks with 400 compliance checks and one with, very minimal. I'm just curious how all those are assigned, and are some of our guys assigned to compliance checks? And thus
Okay,
do more?
I see where you're going to. Yeah, you may have one investigator that primarily works in an area that predominantly does complaint investigation. You're going to have another investigator that the majority of their area has brand new or remodels and that sort of thing. They're going to do a lot more random compliance checks. You've got, eventually we'll have one person back that might do a lot of the electronic, computer-based investigations. So they may not have a lot of job sites that they went to perform some type of compliance check. So yeah, there's a lot of variables there. The majority of the complaints are assigned regionally, but if, let's say, Houston, for example, right now, one person in Houston couldn't possibly do all the complaints that come in there. So that some of those, even though they're not, the investigators not in the region of Houston, they're going to get shifted to whoever's available.
Thank you. Any other questions, board members?
Let me go back, Lisa, to item number 19. On number B, it says Menendez, My Construction Education, Michael S. Chrisman. Are we only approving Michael S. Chrisman, or are we approving every entity that's listed on that line?
Michael S. Chrisman and Jose Carlos work for Menendez.
My Construction. So there's no approval on that. It's just the individuals that are listed, which is consistent with what I think the motion was, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are you done? Any other questions, members? Is there a Mr. Richard Herman is present?
He is, there he is.
Richard, we are down to your portion. Item number 22, the financial department reports.
Okay. I wanted to give everyone a kind of a little review, since we're coming up after the first of the year of a whole new budget cycle. And so I wanted to maybe just kind of touch on that. I've already kind of gone over this with the new members a week or so ago, but I wanted to do that with everybody. If you recall, Texas is on a 2-year budget cycle. That's called a biennium. And each fiscal year begins on September 1st and ends August 31st. No calendar years in Texas government. For state agencies, the first step in preparing a budget is the preparation of the agency's strategic plan, and we'll be preparing that. That will be probably coming up around March, April. They'll list the instructions, and that will be due in June. Strategic plans issue a mission statement for each agency and specific agency goals, and it also includes the agency's description of the means by which the agency plans to achieve its goals. It also defines the performance measures that would be used to assess the agency's success in achieving those goals. Those instructions for the strategic plans are issued in the spring, presiding a legislative session. So they'll be issued around, like I said, about February or March, and submitted to the Legislative Budget Board and the Governor's Office of Budget and Planning in June. But February, March is the time to look at those items at the way we're set up and see if there's any changes made. And Frank and I have talked about that already a little bit. And once approved in spring or early summer, the LBB will issue instructions to prepare our legislative appropriations request, in short called the LAR. And at the same time, the LBB will calculate the maximum budget an agency can ask for in the 2-year biennium, usually based on the 2 years preceding. At the same time, the LBB will calculate the maximum budget that we can ask for. And anything above that maximum is called an exceptional item request. LARs are submitted by August or September, and then they're reviewed by the LBB and Governor's Office. Hearings are set up in the Capitol between them and the agency, and any updates are incorporated into the request at that time. By January of the next year, legislative session starts, and usually by late January, early February, agencies are called to testify about their budget request. By end of May, the General Appropriations Act is finalized, and the governor has 30 days to sign bills or to veto those bills. Excuse me. After legislative session, agencies are asked to prepare their operating budgets, which includes financials and performance measures for the previous year and the 2 years of the new budget. Those are due by December 1st of this year and every other year. We've got one coming up here that's due the end of this month. Annual financial reports, excuse me, are mainly prepared online for the comptroller's office by no later than 30 days after the end of the fiscal year. And one thing to remember about the annual financial report is that they don't show all the revenues we actually collect. Instead, the revenue shown is actually, for the most part, our appropriations or the budget that we've been given to spend by the legislature. There's also another year-end report that's due by December 31st called the Annual Report of Non-Financial Data. It's kind of a hodgepodge of various reports showing indirect transfers between strategies, a schedule of indirect costs that come out of funds collected but not our budget, items such as insurance benefits and retirement benefits paid, what we pay for our building lease, the historically underutilized businesses report, and a list of our state-owned vehicles. All these reports have either been sent to you directly or they're available on our website, but if you have any questions at all about those, I'll be glad to answer those.
Any questions of Richard, board members? Better finances? Richard, I asked you this before, and I'll ask you again. When you take a look at our last year's financials, our appropriations for this year, is there anything that causes you any concern in any area with respect to finance as far as the agency is concerned?
I mean, we did very well in this last legislative session. The first time that I can recall that we ever received every single exceptional item that we requested, that we actually received every single one of those. We actually received, in Senate Bill 1, we received a $5.67 million budget for these next 2 fiscal years, which is bigger than any budget we've ever had. And then also 1 employee was added up to bring us up to 39. We were at 38 before. And then in addition, House Bill 636 authorized 3 additional employees, bringing us up to 42 employees and increasing our budget by almost another $300,000. And then House Bill 2 granted us an additional almost $84,000 for one-time IT enhancements and 2 replacement vehicles. So the total budget that we got from all of that is $6.048 million for the 2 years. So like I said, we did quite well this past legislative session.
Richard, I think I recall several meetings ago, you said that we were going to be subject to an audit from the controller's office this year. Is that still the case?
Well, they tend to audit like every 3 years. And I believe that they audited, 2015 was the last time they audited. And I'm not sure where they are as far as if they're behind because of COVID, if they're behind because they can't get auditors, but we're expecting one anytime, and we're ready.
One of the things, board members, that I think you might remember is we elected not to hire an outside auditor this year because we anticipated the controller coming in and doing an audit of our finances. And there was no need for us to spend 20 grand on an outside auditor and have the controller come in and do the same thing for nothing. So I guess, Richard, we're going to keep that on our radar, but if we don't get some kind of indication that the controller's office is going to do that audit, I guess we need to start thinking in terms of doing our own. So if you can pick up any information, it's just good, prudent policy to have either some outside source come in and look at it. I could not be more comfortable with where we are or what we're doing, but it's always good to have an outsider come in to verify everything that's being done. So.
Okay.
Questions of Richard? Thank you, Richard. We appreciate it. And I'll have your hat back to you later on in the day.
I've never seen that hat before, Frank.
They tell me that you wear it all the time when I'm not here.
No, I never wear hats, but it looks great on you though. Maybe we can get a picture of that for our next newsletter.
We actually have a good one.
Vina, if you're on there, you'll be real proud of me. We had lunch and several of our board members were together back there, and we were very cautious not to discuss any board business whatsoever. It was strictly war stories. And I had to call in a board member because I had some smart aleck board member recommend that we propose a picture of me wearing this hat in the Texas Register and post it for 30 days for comment. So I quickly, Vina, called them in the line and reminded them that's not on the agenda and it's not something that I would even entertain discussing. So I do pay attention to you, Vina.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Lisa, did you have something?
Yes, sir. I had just one item. A big congratulations to all the plumbing inspectors, and anybody that has helped them, probably grandkids and all that stuff. Our renewals are right at 90%. I mean, online. Can you imagine if we were touching all those in paper? And it's been a waste, but I mean, when we rolled it out, everybody jumped right in. But this last year, they have really done an exceptional job. And the thing that went up is the initial license after taking the examination is at 72%. So that's gone up a little bit too. So big pat on the back for everybody that's made their way through our online renewal system and application. You can do almost everything on that application. And we're about to open up the request for a duplicate license application that'll be in there too. So it's getting there. So pat on the back. Renewals are good.
Okay. With that being said, let's move into our public comment. Are there any members of the public that wish to make some comment other than this silly hat? You're welcome to step forward and make a comment. So, anyone? Mr. Wynn, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I just registered as a resource. Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I registered as a resource, but you referred to me specifically for the discussion with the education bill. So I just wanted to affirm what you said. I greatly appreciate you and the other board members really pushing that forward. You know, it's been something the industry's talked about for a long time, the need to have young people in the industry. And so I appreciate that you've been over backwards trying to accommodate the TEA process, which used fairly colorful language to describe that. And I would affirm that was the case in dealing with them. So thank you for getting that across the threshold there, if you will. You know, there's always tension with that about we want to get young people in. We also believe plumbing is a very hands-on industry. And I think you all were very respectful of that along the way as well. But for those who still struggle with that, I want to come back to what Mr. Ainsworth said earlier too, is don't forget, you know, there is still the concept of the responsible master plumber in Texas. And that is ultimately the person that's responsible for making sure that everyone who's in the industry is qualified. And so I think all of that works together. I think the industry helps with that very much. So appreciate your work on that. I'm thrilled about this board and thrilled about the directions that are happening. Everybody's going to be uncomfortable because you said everything is up in the air right now, right? Change is always uncomfortable. But I just want to remind everybody, all of this change is to make sure that when 6 years goes by really quickly, that is an entirely different conversation than we had 2 years ago when this board went through sunset. So that process does not have to get repeated the way it was. And so this is the cost of that, is the changes and the updates that needed to be made. So I appreciate all of you doing that. And I want to especially thank those of you who are new to the board as well. Thanks for agreeing to serve in this capacity.
Thank you, Matthew. Anyone else? If you will, when you step up there, if you're just identifying yourself and
Jason Burnell. I want to thank the board for all their time, and Lisa and everybody at the examination board, the time that they put in. But I do have something to say. I don't want it to sound like I'm attacking anybody or anything. But last meeting, it was mentioned that the emails and the voicemails basically were not going to be answered. That they were referring everybody to go look at the dashboard and see if there's any discrepancies or anything on their applications. I would like to see, basically, if you're not going to answer the voicemail, turn it off. Because if you allow people to leave a voicemail message, it gives them the reasonable expectation that they're going to get a response. And for like one example, we had one of our students put in an application last March, and he was looking at the dashboard that said in progress, and they said it takes about 45 to 50 business days for the application to be processed. That's about 2 months, 2.5 months. So after about 2.5 months, he kept looking at it, kept saying in progress, in progress. And he called, leave messages, and then he kind of, he was nervous. So about 3 months after that, so it'd be about 5 months after he put in his initial application, he called me up, and after a few attempts, I was able to get a hold of somebody at the state board, and there was nothing wrong with this application. It just never got pushed through. And so, like I said, if you allow them to leave the voicemail, it's a reasonable expectation they're going to get a response. And it's not just him. He's an extreme example, but we did have other a lot of our other students that had problems with their application, and it just said that there was an error, and they didn't know what the error was, and they couldn't get a hold of anybody and find out how to fix that. Because so if you're going to defer everybody to the dashboard, make sure that's current, and then that they can look on it and tell exactly what they need. And looking forward to the training in January that y'all are talking about, and the changes on the website. One of the things that kind of threw a wrench in our problems was they took the dates off the endorsement. So when we have people coming in, they were asking us questions, and we're used to looking them up, and we couldn't see those dates on there. But that was one of the things we were going to ask about, but y'all addressed that during the meeting. So appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments. They're always appreciated, whether they're positive or whether we need to improve on something. I'll promise you, we want to hear about them, and we will take a look at what you're talking about. And if you want to give the staff some names, so we can look at specific situations, we'd like to do that too. So thank you. We appreciate your comments. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce myself to the board. My name is Richard Anderson. I work with the International Code Council on their PMG Technical Resources team. ICC wants to commit to the plumbing board our resources for education and outreach. And I want to make myself, the entire PMG team, available to the board and all the licensees in Texas. And just so that everybody knows, Texas is no longer my state where I reside, but I do hold a journeyman's, a master's, and a plumbing inspector's license with the Texas State Board of Plumbing Examiners. So I grew up plumbing in Texas. It's near and dear to my heart. And just if there's education or outreach that this board needs, we would love to partner with you guys on. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
If there's no one else present, Dawn, do we have anyone online that has any comment to make?
Yes, sir. We have two.
Okay, if you'll just call their name and connect them.
Mr. Bobby Duran.
Hello, Mr. Duran.
Mr. Duran, you're muted.
Do you think that he can hear us? Apparently not. Mr. Duran, you are muted if you can hear us. We can't hear you. So if you'll please start over and try again.
Mr. Stanley Briers. He is also on with Mr. Duran.
Let's give them just a minute. I have a lot of problems with technology also, so I have a lot of empathy for those that are trying to get going. So let's give them just a minute to make comments. Lisa, are you working to try to? Okay. Okay, I tell you what, let's do. Let's leave this agenda item. Let's continue to try to make contact with them before they can connect with us, and we'll come back to their public comment. We know they're there. We know they want to make a comment, so let's try to do what we can to make that happen. But in the meantime, let's go to the next board, to the item, agenda item number 24, and that's our next board meeting. As well as, let's take 24 and 25, recommendations for future board meeting agenda items and discussion regarding the date of the next board meeting. Let me start by saying something. First of all, we have tentatively planned, Lisa, is it January the 25th that we were looking at a board meeting to be held in Waco at the TSTC boardroom. And what we hope to do is to have a board meeting at their campus and facility. You'll be extremely impressed with their boardroom. It's really a nice facility. And we can do that in conjunction with having a ribbon cutting at our new testing center. They tell me that we're going to be ready for operation the latter part of January. So we can combine a board meeting in the morning and a ribbon cutting in the afternoon, maybe an open house where board members and the public can go through our testing center and take a look at what they've done. I can assure you it's going to be a real Cadillac. So that's kind of an exciting thing. So let's go ahead and put on our calendars January the 25th. What's neat is TSTC also has a culinary school. So they have offered to cater it for us. And I'm telling you, I've eaten there. It's really outstanding. I mean, it's really, really good stuff. So that will be a real fun board meeting. It'll probably be taken up for the most part with Steve Davis and enforcement. I understand that he pretty well uses that end of the year to clean up all the cases that are hanging out there all year long. So we plan on spending a lot of time on enforcement. The other thing I want to give everyone a heads up about. Those of you who were here last time heard some discussion concerning the requirement of our agency to go through what's known as a quadcentennial rule review. And that's basically a requirement that every 4 years that we go through all of our rules to make us sure that they are still germane, adequate, don't need to be repealed. Maybe they might need to be added to. And we have debated about how to do that. We have done a lot of rule writing as a result of House Bill 636. So we've taken a really big plug out of looking at these rules. And what I would like to do is look at our entire set of rules from page 1 to the end at one time, rather than taking it section or paragraph by paragraph and putting it through this 90-day process that it takes to make any kind of revision. I'd like to look at every one of the rules at one time. And the reason I think we can do that, we've already changed a vast number of rules based on House Bill 636. We've repealed a ton of things out of there. So we are going to take a stab at doing that. And I feel really, really fortunate that we have run across a young man named Ames O'Boyle sitting right there against the wall in the back. Many of you board members may not realize this, but Ames, prior to coming to us, worked at the Senate Research Center. And his job was to take a bill and analyze a bill and put it into plain English so that the senators could know what they were passing when they passed it. So basically, he did a bill analysis, put bullet points and specifics in plain English so these senators could get up and argue for the bill, because as you all know, they're in legal terms that nobody can understand it and read it. So he has a unique quality and ability to do that. And we have asked him to start at the beginning and look at every one of our rules. And I'd like for this to be called a plain talk initiative, because part of what I want to do is, and you are the perfect person to do it, Ames, because I want it in English where I can read it and understand it. I don't have to call a lawyer to figure it out. And I want it the same for a plumber. We did this about 15 years ago with that agency that I won't mention. But we called it a plain talk initiative. We went through every one of our rules and we tried to put it in plain English where just a person off the street could pick it up and understand that's what the rule is. It's clear, it's unambiguous, easy for the plumbers to understand, easy for the board or the agency to enforce. So it will be subject to legal review when Ames goes through this and does the language and puts in terms. It's not a finished document. It will have a legal review. We will go through it to make sure we've done the things we're legally required to do. But I think it's really important not to put it in legal terms. And if we've got anything in our rules that require you to go to the law books to research 2 or 3 different statutes to understand what you just found out, let's try to eliminate it and just give me a sentence what I'm supposed to do. So that's the goal. and I think it's an important one. And I think the plumbers are going to benefit from it. I think the agency will benefit because it'll be clear and easy for us to enforce and easy for them to understand. So we're going to call that a plain talk initiative for our rules. And I mention it now because we have to go through the process. Once we do this rule review, it'll have to be voted on. We'll have to post it for 30 days. A 30-day comment period will follow that. It'll then go over to the regulatory compliance agency of the governor's office to look for antitrust violations. They have generously given themselves 90 days. So there's another 90 days we'll add on top of it. And when they finish with that, assuming it's unchanged, we get to adopt it. So rather than piecemealing this through a paragraph at a time, I think we need to take a look at the whole thing. So I would ask the board members to start at the beginning. And if there's anything in those rules that you find to be ambiguous, not understandable, or not applicable anymore, send Ames an email. And I make that offer to the public also. We've done this before. We've given you some advance notice and 2 bites out of the apple. You're going to get another bite when we formally post it in the Texas Register to make your comments. But if there are some things that you would like for us to particularly take a look at in the initial writing, then send Ames an email, identify clearly what it is you want us to take a look at and what your suggestion is. And we'll take a look at it. And Lisa's probably going to scold me, but Lisa, did you have something?
For simplicity's sake and for a way to gather these initial comments, we won't call them, these are going to be thoughts at this point, because once they become comments to a proposed rule, then we have to include them in a whole lot of places. But for simplicity's sake, let's use the rule comment and we'll send it out to someone email rather than his internal email.
Okay.
That way multiple people can see the comments.
That's great. It's just that we need to instruct the public, the people that
Yeah.
might be listening today, and as well as our board members, what are they to do if they've got some comments?
Yeah.
So how am I going to do that?
Let's do that. We'll send out something with the best way to send the comment. What I'd really like to do now that we got these rules, this chunk of rules done today, I'd like to put together a good draft, which we've been working on, and clarify the draft, and then that'll give everybody something to look at so that they'll know that what we just repealed has been replaced, and they'll be looking at the correct thing. And then we'll send to comments.
That's a great idea, but because there's no use in commenting on something we just repealed or we just replaced. So
It's hard enough for us to keep up with, let alone everybody else, but we know what we did.
So as I understand it, how are you going to notify people how to do this? Are you going to put it on our website?
I think we'll just put it on the website. Kevin will put it on there, however I come up with it. And then we can send a blast out too.
Well, let's do the blast also, because everybody doesn't check our website every day. I don't check it every day. I imagine plumbers don't either.
Yeah, we can send it to our blast book. We've got a whole bunch of email addresses.
But what we're trying to do is we're trying to get input before we get formal input. If you've got some good ideas and we want them incorporated in our rule package, give them to us up front, and maybe we can work them in or incorporate them in the rule review that we're doing. And if we can't, we'll post it formally. You can make another comment, make your argument. So we're giving you 2 bites out of the apple. And the reason I bring that up, depending on how this goes and how quickly we can get this out there and how quickly Ames can get the job done, we might try to squeeze in a board meeting, if nothing else, just to approve this draft of rules. It's one that I anticipate we could send out to you and maybe do it by Zoom meeting where you wouldn't have to come back to Austin again. But I can't give you a date because I told Ames I wasn't going to pin him down. He's got, like so many of our employees, he wears a lot of hats. He's helping us with our criminal background checks, and we've asked him to do this in addition to. So you can do it anytime you want in the next 30 days.
Does he wear a football shaped hat?
Yeah, and I tell you what, we might have a surprise for you, Ames.
Be careful.
But anyway, that's kind of the plan and what we might try to do. And I joke about that because it is a big job. And but depending on what kind of progress he's able to make, what kind of input we get, we might send that out and maybe do a board meeting, if nothing else, just to get comments from the board, approve it for public comment so we can start the process again. So anyone else have anything that we've not talked about that you would like to see on a future agenda? Okay. Put the 25th of January on your calendar because that'll be a really good. It'll be a chance for you to look at the plumbing program at TSBPE as our testing center. So it'll be a really fun meeting for us. Any luck on our public or on our comments?
No, sir.
Are they still online?
Yes, sir.
Oh, Stanley's probably still talking. Well, I don't know what to do. Do you? For those of you who are listening, Lisa is actually trying to call them on the telephone to see if we can get this straightened out. We believe what's happened is that they have muted their end. Is that what you think's going on?
He said adjourn.
Okay. He gave up. So, well, I tell you what, you both have. That was probably one of our board members. Which one of you guys sent that to Lisa? Are you done? Are you giving up, Lisa? All right. I'm going to give it about 30 seconds and then we're going to adjourn. If they can hear us, they both got my cell number. If they want to say something to me, they can give me a call directly. So.
I think there's no reception.
Usually 3 minutes.
Okay. With that being said, I would like to call the meeting adjourned. Thank you, board members. Thank you, members of the public.